Hey guys, my name's Saf, and today I'll be talking to you about using data science for measuring your campaign effectiveness. And this will be heavily focused on data, AI, there'll be a bit of machine learning in there. And I hope you enjoy this presentation as I take you on your own data journey. But before I get started, I just want to clarify one thing, which is that although I work at Facebook, none of this represents Facebook in any way. And none of these are any sort of internal materials. This is purely my learnings and I'm trying to share with you guys. Cool. Let's get started with a quote actually. And this is something that really resonates with me, especially I've been looking at ads and marketing, where Kim Walsh, who works at HubSpot for startups, said that the modern marketer is an experimenter, a lover of data, a content creator, and a justifier of ROI. So this kind of puts in a nutshell exactly what data science for marketing is. It's about design. It's also about looking at the data. It's about generating business outcomes from the data, making sure that all the investment you're putting in is something that's paying back for you. I'll walk you through the agenda for today. It's pretty brief, and a lot of it will be me speaking and the few words on the slide. So we'll start with me introducing myself. We'll go through what we intend to achieve through this session. We'll talk a bit about what your marketing data should look like and how to get in the state that's optimal. We'll talk about what a customer's marketing journey will look like, and we'll bring the data and the marketing journey together and talk about how data science can be used for marketing. And then there's a closing piece where I'll just talk a little bit about what the next steps are for you folks, and then how to contact me if you have any further questions. Cool. So who am I? My name's Saf Faruqi. I work at Facebook right now. The logo you see on the left is Facebook Startup Accelerator, which is a new program that they started to help bring startups into the fold, which might build products which help with Facebook marketing in the future. I've also been collaborating with some of my colleagues from Facebook and PayPal on an organization called Sprout, where we try to help startups achieve their goals through product, data, and marketing. Down below is a few of my previous companies and my college. You can see it's a very diverse skill set. Like I've bounced around a lot to different fields. I worked in consulting, I worked in healthcare, behavioral research. Depot was the short-lived startup that we had trying to use AI to provide media recommendations. The point of putting all of that here is that basically through my whole liberal arts journey, starting at college and then even throughout the world, you pick up a lot of information. And data is all about picking up information, absorbing it, and using it in the best way possible. It's very much the hacker mindset that they teach at Facebook. Cool. Now, what do I want to have you guys leave the session with? I want to give you the tools and methods so you can go out and measure the effectiveness of your own campaigns. Through my nerdiness and through my vigor, I want to kind of get you an appreciation for data and how to use it. The last part is I want to open your eyes to kind of how machine learning is being used in marketing. One point there is that machine learning is seen as this big mysterious thing, but it's kind of always been around, especially in marketing. It's just we haven't really seen it in that light. Cool. So let's get started with marketing data. What does data mean in marketing? So what kind of data do you want and what kind of data do you need in order to optimize your marketing? You want to be looking at events. So what are events? Events include anytime someone comes on your website, anytime someone clicks on something, anytime someone views something, where are they going and what are they doing? And are they going on the journey that you intended for them to go on? You want some degree of profiles. You want some information on where is this person coming from? What time are they logging on? If they're already on your site and they've subscribed, then are they male or female? How old are they? And this helps you figure out segmentation that you can use later. The demographics fits in there as well, like where are they coming from and how old are they? Again, fits in with who are the people we should be targeting. There's platforms, for instance, you might find that certain campaigns work better on Android or iOS based on inherent differences. Some Windows users might prefer something versus some other Apple users. And are they looking at your website on Chrome or another browser, and how is that working out for you? And this is all to kind of drive ROI on your marketing efforts to help you hone in on exactly what you need to do for marketing. The last part is important, and kind of one of the biggest pieces, it's costs. You only have a certain marketing budget, and you always want to be aware of where am I spending my money and what is it getting back for me. The what is it getting back for me part, that's what I'm going to help you with. But always be aware of how much you have, how much is being spent, and where it's going. And this is important for data as well, because data isn't cheap necessarily. Data storage, computational costs, every query you run on AWS costs a certain amount of money. And that should definitely factor into the outcomes you're using. And that will help determine as I go through the data science methods, which one you actually work on and which one is the best suited for your specific use case. Cool. Now, before we proceed, I want to take data to the next level and look at things that we can derive from the data. I'm going to talk about metrics. I'm going to talk about value metrics and customer metrics. Value metrics pertain directly to costs. CPA means cost per acquisition, and that's basically how much it costs you to get that user into your journey, into your product. Now, this can vary by everyone. Like, what does acquisition even mean for people? Does acquisition mean they came in and signed up for your newsletter? Does acquisition mean they came in and bought one product, two products, three products? And this can vary by everyone, but it's how much it costs to get your customer into your journey, into your product. CPI is cost per install. So this is directly applicable to app owners or app products, which is how much does it cost you to get someone to install the app? Because once they've got the app, you've kind of got them hooked. You've got them hooked and you can start reeling them in. But how much it costs for you to get them from point A to point B? From, hey, this app looks cool, to, hey, I want to install this and start working on it. Last part is CPC. And this kind of, from my perspective, encompasses a lot of the other visual metrics as well, which is, I want people clicking on my site. I want people clicking on my ads. I want people to be looking at them. This is also where cost per impression fits in. And we go with, okay, do I want to optimize for that? Do I want more people clicking? Because I know of all the people who click, a certain proportion will get in. And sometimes you just need to play the numbers game. Like 10% of 100 is worse than a 10% of 10,000, even though it's still just 10%. So if you spread your net wide and bring people in, they will convert. The second part is customer metrics. This is more focused on, through your marketing, what kind of people do you want to bring in? So we talked before about acquisition, which is we're bringing the users that you want for your product. But we want to bring users who are less likely to churn. And we can use this. We can use marketing to also figure out what kind of users are coming in, so that we can reduce churn. But ideally, you want to use the correlation the other way, with, are we bringing people who churn more? How do we reduce that? How do we identify the people to target? Churn correlates very heavily with lifetime value. There's many ways of calculating lifetime value, but it basically boils down to, if I bring this customer in over the lifetime that they're in, over the duration that they work on my product, on my website, how much value will they bring to me? Value can mean different things. Value can mean brand value. Value can mean number of products bought. Value can mean number of subscriptions. And it's measured in various ways. The last part is customer retention rate, which is customers are coming in, are they staying there? Now, there's very few industries where you don't want customer retention. For example, all of e-commerce is based on retention. You want to bring people in the first time, and even if their ticket size is small, in the sense of when they first buy something, your revenue comes from when they keep on buying things. And retention is important for SaaS businesses as well, because you want people to keep on paying the subscription fee, but also keep on learning and keep on becoming an advocate for you. Cool. Now that we have a certain number of metrics in mind, and those, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, are the core metrics that you want to focus on, keep in mind that with metrics come goals. You want to set goals based on those metrics, and throughout a half, a quarter, whatever duration you have, you want to move towards improving those metrics. The one most important lesson I want to convey is that one size doesn't fit all for metrics or goals. It depends on which vertical you're in, what stage your company is at, and what your product actually is. And customers fits into the product segment as well, which is, what kind of customers are you looking for your product? Stage is basically, are you looking for retention? Are you looking to keep the people in the game? Are you looking for growth? Are you looking to get more users? Are you just looking to expand your brand and make sure the brand stays in the consciousness? Like for someone like Coca-Cola in India, for instance, they're already at mass scale, but they want to make sure that they stay at that scale. So it's kind of maintenance in that sense. And we discussed verticals earlier, but the metrics really do vary by which vertical you're in. For e-commerce, as I mentioned, the ticket size for the first purchase could be less than your cost per acquisition. So you've actually paid them to buy something from you. But it's because they'll keep on coming back and buying more things. And then let other people know that they're buying these things. And that works out just fine. For certain SaaS businesses, if you're spending a lot of money on the computational side, on the product itself, people aren't coming in, then something's off. And you need to optimize your marketing or you need to find better targeting. Cool. Let's talk briefly now about the customer marketing journey. So just full disclosure, this is one of the few diagrams in my presentation where I actually took it from another source. The source is at the bottom. But it kind of encapsulates exactly how we think about the customer journey and where marketing fits in. You start folks off at awareness. This is an older version. I mean, radio and TV are still very prominent in certain areas of the world, by the way. That's something people like to ignore. But you want to start from awareness where people start listening to your brand and saying, okay, there's this thing out there that I could really use, but is it good for me or not? You want to gradually convert them into consideration. Okay, this seems like the thing I want. This seems like a thing I want to buy. This seems like a service I need. Then you eventually get them to purchase or conversion, which is they're finally on your app, they're finally on your website, they're finally on your mailing list. As you continue to grow your relationship with them, they stay on your website and keep on contributing. And they can contribute in various ways, either through being a loyal customer and keep on giving recurring revenue, or by giving you feedback on how to improve the product. Once your attention is maximized, they move to advocacy. And they become your word of mouth. Word of mouth will never die. People are saying how social media is a new word of mouth and in-person chats aren't really useful. But most of the information I get is from word of mouth. When my friends are on a VC call nowadays and they'll mention they bought something from someone, I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And it comes with the personal cachet. And so we want to look at marketing each of these categories. How do you get people aware? How do you make them consider your product? How do you convert them? And how do you keep them? And now we move to the big chunk of this presentation, which is how can you use data science methods? How can you use analytics to get an edge in marketing? The very first question is, what do you want to test? So you can test multiple things in marketing. Your digital marketing is to achieve certain goals, which is you want more people coming to your site, you want more people coming to your product, you want more people coming to your app. But your app is already in current state, and how can you improve the ads? How can you improve the marketing for that? You can focus on copy, which just means what does the ad look like? What is the writing in the ad? You can test two different versions of the same paragraph, like which catchphrase sticks with people. You can look at placement, like is your product the kind of product that sits well on the right side of the Facebook app, as opposed to the banner at the top, as opposed to just in the feed itself? Is it immersive enough that is it native and immersive enough that people don't notice as they're scrolling down that they actually just saw an ad? Or is it something you want to stick out and people to say like, okay, this is an ad, but I like this ad? What kind of image are you using? And this varies by geography as well. Like, are you using the right image to actually appeal to people in Brazil versus people, for instance, in Saudi Arabia? They're very different perspectives on what they want to see in ads. And the last key part here is targeting. Now, this is not just targeting within any channel or within any platform. It's also targeting for different platforms. So I've seen SaaS businesses make mistakes where they go out and they just put Facebook ads up. And you get a lot of random people that way who aren't necessarily spenders, who don't really want a SaaS business. And then they go to LinkedIn or they go on Facebook and start targeting people on director or certain company names in their profiles, and they get much more lift out of that. And that's something you want to explore to a certain degree. You already have certain hypotheses, but you want to see if those hypotheses are true. And the whole goal of this presentation is to get you comfortable with hypotheses and testing. I have the slide at the end, but I'll say it now again. Always be testing. Always validate your hypotheses. Cool. Now we go to the fancy algorithmic part of the presentation, where I'm going to be talking to you guys about these 4 methods of using data science for marketing. One is, I think everyone has heard of before, mixed media modeling, also known as media mix modeling and a bunch of other things. But if you say MMM to a marketer, they'll know what you're talking about. We'll talk about A/B testing and basically how do you design an experiment to see if your launch will be successful, if your new version is good or not. We'll talk about pre-post analysis, which is you launch something, and after you launched, what do you see now? Did it actually make the impact you think it would? The last piece is attribution, which is also looking back into the data and see how people got to where they are right now. These are all different, solving different problems for marketing. Mixed media modeling is a very high level kind of perspective on, I saw people made a purchase. Why did they make this purchase? A/B testing gets to the point of, what do I want to launch right now? What will be the impact of my launch? Pre-post analysis, I launched it. Did it do what I think it would? Did it not? Like, how do I get there? And attribution gets very granular into the user level details. Remember those data points we talked about before? So it uses all of those to kind of hone in on exactly what's happening right there. Cool. We'll start off with a small section on media mix modeling. It's an old school way. It works on aggregate insights, and it's the most prevalent in the market right now. Whenever someone says, okay, I want to figure out how to optimize my marketing, how to optimize my ad spend, they do media mix modeling. For the more statistically inclined of you, it's basically popping a bunch of variables into a regression model and seeing which variables actually help predict ad spend or marketing revenue. It's a simple way to get high-level insights because it uses a lot of aggregated information for like how much did you spend on this channel versus that channel, and which one is actually correlated. One caveat is that basically often if for the folks working on it aren't super technical, they might miss a lot of things. Again, for the more nerdy amongst you, the error term in the regression actually tells you how much of the variation you were able to predict. And if that's super high and you're ignoring it, that means your model doesn't really tell you much. And more we find now that the industry is moving to data-driven attribution, which you've seen it from Google, you've seen from Facebook, you've seen from a variety of sources. And we know that that is the future. And we're slowly getting there. So before we proceed with that, I want to talk to you about A/B testing and pre-post analysis for actually measuring effectiveness, because I think this is the core of what you will be concerned with. A/B tests and pre-post analysis both have their pros and cons, but they're directly comparable in what you're intending to do with them. So with an A/B test, you get control. In A/B test, you set up the experiment, you figure out who your test group is, who your control group is, and what you want them to see. And that level of control brings a great degree of confidence that I'm doing everything I can to figure out what the outcome will be. It also gets a very high level of attribution, and this is, of course, if you set up the experiment correctly. Attribution in this sense means I saw a change. Was it due to the thing I introduced or some other factor? Now, because you have the test group and the control group and all the other people, the test and the control group both have the same environment. They both have the same demographics. They both have the same kind of profiles. So you know that amongst these group, this is what works, disregarding all the other folks. It also gives you a sense of foresight. Because of the control, because of how you structured the experiment properly, you can see what's going to happen if you launch this to a large degree of confidence. The problem with A/B tests is that they're costly, because as soon as you run an A/B test, you're exposing one portion of the population to one thing, another to another thing, and then there's an entire population segment which is not exposed. And there's an opportunity cost there. Suppose you introduce a new image or a new way to display the product, but it didn't actually work. So for those maybe 10% of users that were in the test group, they actually didn't see anything. And that's a loss for you that you could have avoided. So you want to make sure you structure it properly. There's a huge engineering and data science effort involved in that. It takes some time. You want to run the A/B test long enough so that you can see the effects that you want to see. Like you might introduce an ad initially, but it doesn't get the exposure you want, and it kind of ramps up an exposure based on the algorithms in the different platforms. So you want to give it that amount of time, but that's opportunity cost as well. The other two downsides are things that can be addressed, but it takes a lot of effort and time as well, where you need the technical know-how to be able to build good experiment design. Because if you run an A/B test without actually properly considering all the variables and what's going on, you will run into some issues where what you saw in the A/B test is not what you saw in the real world. So usually I explain this to people as, so here's the population, right? And you're taking the sample out of the population. And you're saying what's happening in the sample tells me what's happening in the population. That can only happen if you design your experiment properly. Make sure you have the right statistical significance, make sure you have the right model, the right test, and your data is in the right format. Otherwise, you'll end up with, this is the population, this is the sample you're looking at, and it doesn't have any correlation. That's where pre-post analysis comes in as well. It's much more straightforward. Basically, you launch something, you saw how the metrics were before, you look at how the metrics are now. The problem is the pros of the A/B test become the cons of the pre-post analysis. You can't attribute your change to any given intervention that you made. There might be a bunch of other stuff going on that you can't observe. It's very retrospective, and you can't go back and actually say, let's not launch this, because you've already launched it. And undoing it takes a lot of effort. And if your pre-post analysis isn't defined correctly, you run into the problem of not having much confidence in the results. I'm sure you folks are familiar with confidence intervals. And if you measure those properly, you can see how confident you actually are in the results. And you always need confidence intervals. So let's give an example. Assume your click-through rate is 4%. Now, there's a big difference between a click-through rate of 4% plus minus 2% versus a confidence interval of 4% plus minus 0.5%. And this is all from estimations. The first part is basically telling you, I am almost 100% sure that my click-through rate is somewhere between 2% and 6%. Your CEO goes, that doesn't tell me anything. Like, what is our click-through rate? Oh, I'm not sure, but it's between 2% and 6%. And that basically throws all the strategy out the window. You end up with 4% plus minus 0.5%. It's between 3.5 and 4.5%. And that's something you can work with. It's like in that narrow range. And in any analysis you do, in any testing you do, you want to make sure you're measuring the confidence interval so you know exactly what you're doing. You might have seen this kind of approach recently with COVID as well, where the scientists were estimating that COVID could reach up to 1.7 million people or 20,000 people based on the confidence interval. And that makes sense. They didn't have enough data to work when they're doing this really quickly, but it helps us have a lower bar as well. Cool. So the gist of this is run the A/B test whenever you can, whenever time permits, whenever you have the capabilities, and whenever you have the people to do it. Otherwise, the pre-post analysis can also work. It won't be as precise or accurate as an A/B test, but it'll give you insight that you need if done properly. Okay, so given that A/B testing is the preferred method and the best way to test effectiveness of your marketing campaigns, we'll talk a bit more about that. In particular, I want to help demystify the concept of A/B testing. It's something you hear a lot. People don't usually go into details about what it is and how to do it. The most important thing for A/B testing is experiment design. So make sure it's the person who's helping you set up your A/B test knows about experimental design, knows about statistics, and knows what they're doing. The first part of A/B testing is sampling, just figuring out the right samples to run the test on. Usually we go with 10% in the control group, 10% in the test group, and 80% of the population is not considered for the experiment. The test group is where we have the new intervention. The intervention could be they're seeing a new image, they're seeing a different image from everyone else. They're seeing a new version of the copy, or it's a different targeting mechanism. And the control group is a very similar group to the test group in terms of profile and demographics, and they're matched correctly. This is the reason the other 80% are excluded, because we worked very hard to match these two groups, the test and control groups, using a variety of machine learning methods. And we want to see, in exactly the same environment, what additional effect, what lift does our change cause. Next part is the duration. Now, duration might not seem like that big of a factor in A/B testing, and it's usually something people overlook. But the duration matters because it takes time for you to get the results you need. It takes time for people to start absorbing what's going on. And it takes time for you to evaluate what effect this will have. So for instance, you introduce a new ad and it's trendy right now. You run it for if you run it for a week, it's still trendy, and so you'll see a huge lift right there. If you actually run it for the 4 weeks which we recommend, after the first week, that will drop off and you'll actually see that's less effective in marketing. And so that's why duration is important. Make sure you get a sense of, in the long run, however long I'm expecting to run this campaign, how effective will this new tool be or this new feature be. The important thing here, of course, is to calibrate that with the length of your marketing campaign. So it's going to be a short-term campaign? Sure. Just run a 1-week experiment and see what happens. If it's a new feature you're going to introduce, a new change you're going to make, like all the placement ads will be in banners as opposed to the right side from now on, make sure you run a comprehensive longer test so that you can trust the results. The other part is the metric. So for A/B testing, you're testing two groups, A and B groups, test and control. You want to make sure you have one primary metric in mind, which is, I am making this change to increase this metric. I am making this change to reduce my customer acquisition cost. That's by taking maybe fewer steps in the funnel, or just as you're changing your image. You're changing your image to make sure you appeal to a broader range of people and so more people click on it. And that's your primary metric. At the same time, you want to look at counter metrics. When you're running an experiment, when you're running a test, you want to see, is my primary metric getting better without any negative effect on my counter metrics? So is my customer acquisition cost going lower, while my other metrics are staying the same? Or they might be getting better, but you also want to keep that in mind. And so visually, the best dashboard you can have for an A/B test is one graph with the metric, primary metric, another graph with the counter metrics, and just look at what's happening. Simplicity is key, by the way. The last part is testing. We want to make sure we're doing the right tests. And this is where the data scientists in us, this is where the analysts come in, which is, how do you evaluate the results? This goes back to sampling as well, where someone goes, hey, we only had 15 people in each group. The data scientist turns on and goes, hey, that's not enough for me to assume the distribution is normal. So a lot of the statistical tools we use out there, like t-tests, chi-square tests, can't be used because we can't, they won't fit into the assumptions. Then they go, okay, let me try this new thing I have called permutations testing, which is for smaller sample sizes. Or let me run bootstrapping to get the confidence intervals for this sample. But it's very important to be able to make those decisions so you can actually see how well your sample can predict the population. Another part of testing is, do you want to just look at correlations between different variables, or do you want to look at multiple variables? And this is something we'll talk about in attribution as well. Cool. Now that we're done with A/B testing, we're not done. Keep in mind, this whole session is basically an introduction for you. There's no way we could cover in half an hour the entire end-to-end data science spectrum for marketing, but hopefully this gets you interested, hopefully this gets you excited, and you start learning more and more. So attribution is kind of a touchy topic where, I just made a pun, I didn't intend to do that. But attribution is a touchy topic. There's various ways you can attribute marketing outcomes to the journey of the customer before they got to you, or even within your app or product. The traditional way is last touch, which is the last place they came from is what I'll give the entire weight to and say, that is what caused the marketing conversion. This is what caused my decrease in customer acquisition cost. It's all because of this. First touch is, it's the first step of the journey they took. Everything else is irrelevant. I just want to look how they got into the funnel and then put the entire weight there. Linear is, everything is equal. Wherever they went, that equal effect on their decision to convert or their decision to purchase. So I'm just going to assume that everything is equal. Just kind of probably not the best approach. There's time decay, which is the first place they went had the least impact on them, but as they kept on going deeper in the funnel, they got more and more interested. That also assumes everything is equal, but the people are impatient or people are more short-term thinkers. There's positional, which is, I don't care what will happen in the middle. I want the entry point and the exit point. I just want to look at those two. All of these have their pros and cons. And that's why we're seeing more and more movement towards data-driven attribution, especially as the computing systems become more proficient, especially people gain more knowledge of how to bring machine learning into the daily life and how to actually figure out these problems. So this is a very abstract diagram I have for you. But this gives you the gist of data-driven attribution. You get all that cool data you collected, the ones we talked about, the events, the profiles, and everything, and you put it into a model which basically tells you, okay, these factors are what caused this conversion. These factors are what people got from point A to point B, and these are the weights each of them have. So if you go back and look at this one, in the data-driven one, you can see there's different weights, right? That's because Facebook was super effective in helping you market, whereas once they got to your website, it actually dropped off a bit, which is likely. And this gives you a model which you can say, okay, these are the weights I should use, and it gives you a very granular approach to this is where I should optimize my marketing. If you use any of the other approaches, you use last touch, then what you're constantly doing is giving more money to that last platform. It starts not doing well, another last touch happens, and you go somewhere else. And basically, if you use approaches that are data-driven, you're essentially taking a risk because you don't know why people are doing what they're doing and where they're coming from. Going back to our concept of confidence intervals, the confidence interval that you have for anything other than data-driven attribution will be large. You'll be like, okay, I'm between 20% and 100% sure that last touch attribution gives me the right result, versus I'm between 70 and 90% sure that data-driven attribution gives me the right result I need. Cool. And that was all I had to say to you guys. I hope you learned a lot from this. I hope you have some insight that you can take back. Just remember to always be testing. Just remember to always look at your hypotheses. The history of marketing is built on a lot of gut instinct. I remember I had conversations in meetups and whatnot where I was like, oh, why did you make this decision to change the image from A to B? And they'd go, oh, it was my gut instinct. My boss's gut instinct, in fact. And that doesn't really fly anymore. Like, all these companies out there are built on data. Uber is built on data. Facebook is built on data. Google's built on data. They wouldn't have gone as far as they have without being able to look at the data and say, what are customers doing? What do they want? What's working? What isn't working? And in this quote-unquote brave new world, you want to start using more and more data and more machine learning methods to figure out how to optimize your campaigns. Thank you very much. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any more questions.